Everyone may be seated. Good morning. We are ready to proceed. Ladies and gentlemen, this witness has been previously sworn to testify truthfully. Ms. Anderson.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Dr. Imhoff. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Eric Imhoff. I am HOF.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Imhoff, I'm going to show you what has already been admitted into evidence as defense exhibit number 90. Would you take a look at that, please?
Yes.
And what do you recognize defendant's exhibit number 90 to be?
This is a current copy of my CD.
Now, Dr. Imhoff, tell the jury a little bit about your education and background.
Certainly. I earned a bachelor's in science with a specialty in psychology from James Madison University in 1989. I proceeded directly from that institution to the Virginia Consortium program in professional psychology. They've since changed the name, I'm sorry. The Virginia Consortium program in clinical psychology. And earned a doctorate in clinical psychology from that institution in 1996. It's actually a conglomerate of 4 universities: Old Dominion in Norfolk, the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia, Norfolk State in Norfolk, and also Eastern Virginia Medical School.
And Dr. Imhoff, if you can do me a favor, you're a low talker. If you could use the microphone, pull it
My
forward.
apologies, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's quite all right. So what is your profession?
I am a forensic psychologist.
What does a forensic psychologist do?
We practice in the area where psychology, mental health issues intersect with the legal system, the criminal justice system. Our role is to help educate the court regarding mental health issues.
Does that mean that you're a licensed psychologist?
Yes.
Okay. Where are you currently licensed?
Currently, I'm licensed in my home state of Florida. I also retain my license from Virginia. I am also licensed in Alabama, as well as Connecticut, and I hold a temporary license here in Texas that was issued in September of last year. It's good for 1 year.
In addition to doing forensic work, do you do any clinical work?
No, I only do evaluations.
How long have you been a practicing psychologist?
I actually began practicing prior to earning my degree. I started in 1993. I worked in a very large residential juvenile treatment center in Portsmouth, Virginia.
Tell the jury a little bit about your career. What have you been doing over the years since your graduation?
Well, so I worked in that institution until I took actually a different position with the parent company. I was employed by the Pines Residential Treatment Center, which was owned by First Hospital Corporation. They then instituted a program where they wanted to do research and outcomes and study kind of the interventions we were doing with our youth to see what was more beneficial, what was more helpful. I took that position in, it was about 97, 96, 97. I maintained that position until 99 when I decided to take a position as a program director of a Department of Juvenile Justice Level 8 secure facility in Pembroke Pines, Florida, which is what then brought me to Florida. I worked for that institution, unfortunately, for a very short period of time. New management came in, they just restructured things. They put me into a position of director of research and outcomes for their company, which I didn't really want to do. And in June of 2000, I started my own practice. And I've been doing that ever since and done different work in that practice.
Dr. Imhoff, are you a member of some professional organizations?
Yes.
Are those reflected in your resume that has been admitted as defense exhibit number 90?
Yes.
In looking at your resume, do you have any corrections that you need to make?
The only mistake I noticed this morning was I'm a member of a professional organization known as the Association for the Prevention and Treatment of Sexual Abuse, or ATSA. I am also a member of the state chapter of that organization, of which I was a board member. And I've been a board member for a very long time, but I stopped being a board member in 2000, and that's not accurately reflected in my CV.
That organization that you were speaking of, were you the president of that organization?
Yes, on 2 occasions.
And for how many years?
The first time I was president was for 3 years. The second time was for 5 years.
Dr. Imhoff, have you ever been published?
Yes.
How many times have you been published?
Outside of work that I did as a graduate student for professors and got published that way, the only other publication I have was a book chapter related to assessing internet child pornography offenders.
Is your practice more evaluation and less research?
I do no research.
Have you ever presented to professionals at conferences on the topic of autism?
Yes.
Have you ever trained any non-mental health professionals on topics related to autism?
Yes.
How often would you say you speak?
Maybe once every other month or 3 or 4 times a year. We train attorneys to understand autism. We train public defenders, federal public defenders. We train prosecutors. We've done some trainings with the Sexually Violent Predator Program in Florida. We've trained probation officers at the federal level, and we also train at the state level probation officers just to understand autism and the issues that may come up during their work with them.
So it sounds like you train people from all facets of the criminal justice system.
Yes.
Have you ever testified in court before?
Yes.
Both civil and criminal?
No, mostly criminal.
Have you testified in both state and federal courts?
Yes.
And have you testified for both the state or for prosecutors and defense?
Yes.
What's that ratio? I mean, how often do you testify for the state versus the defense and vice versa?
I honestly don't keep track of that information, but I would estimate roughly about 50-50.
Whoever reaches out to you?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Imhoff, are you being paid for your time in this case?
Yes.
How much is your hourly rate?
My hourly rate is $450 an hour.
Do you have a partner that you will work with on cases such as this?
Yes.
Do you and your partner offer a rate that if you both work together?
Yes, we often work as a team. We take a team approach to our evaluations. So Dr. Spence has her rate, I have my rate. When we work together, we give kind of a discounted rate, which is about $600.
Do you know about how many hours you put into this case?
I don't have an actual calculation of the hours. We did come do an evaluation, so we traveled one day. We were here on the ground 3 days. We traveled back another day. We did write a report in this case. My rough guess, probably I spent 15 hours working on that report. Obviously, our prep time and our travel here and our time here is being billed as well.
And Dr. Imhoff, you mentioned a report. May I approach your honor?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to hand you what has already been admitted into evidence as Defendant's Exhibit number 91. Is this the report that was prepared for this case?
Yes.
Dr. Imhoff, what were you asked to do in this case?
We were asked to confirm a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder.
How do you do that? I mean, give the jury a brief overview on your methodology conducting an evaluation such as this?
Well, usually we start by reviewing records. We're looking for any indication of behaviors related to autism, prior diagnoses, mental health treatment, that type of thing. So we ask for all the records available in discovery. We will then proceed to meet with the client. We will do an interview to collect our own information. Typically interviews are just more social history in these cases, looking at things like where did they grow up, a little bit about their family, school history, how they got along with people, work history, mental health treatment history, obviously, alcohol and drug use, if any. We will also do a mental status exam, which is really, for lack of a better description, like a mental health checkup. We kind of go through all the diagnostic categories and see if that person has ever had any problems with any of those mental health issues in their lifetime. Then we will also do testing, which helps us confirm the diagnosis.
Dr. Imhoff, I noticed on your report that you weren't the sole author of the report. Who else contributed to that report?
Dr. Spence, partner in my practice.
Why would you only write one report? Why not have your own reports for each of you?
Well, essentially, as I described, we work as a team approach, and we take the information. Dr. Spence has skill sets, I have skill sets. We kind of combine those skill sets and produce just one product.
You talked about reviewing records. Were you provided records in this particular case?
Yes.
Is a list of those records contained in the report that you prepared?
They would be in the appendix at the back of our report, yes.
Now, generally speaking, well, let me back up. Where did you get the records? Who provided those?
They would have come from your office.
In the records that we provided to you, did that also contain discovery that was provided by the state of Texas?
Yes.
Did you receive and review reports from other experts in this case?
Yes.
And everything that you reviewed is in the report?
Yes.
Okay. Did you watch the video of the abduction?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that something that was relevant to what you did in this particular case?
We watched videos really looking for expressions of autism, symptoms of autism may have come out during that presentation. It's often very helpful for us to see video of someone before we actually go meet with them to determine whether or not there's enough there to go forward with the full evaluation.
Based upon what you saw, did you feel there was enough to go forward with the full evaluation?
Yes, from what we saw in the records and what we saw in the videos, yes.
You spoke earlier about doing clinical assessments. In doing a clinical assessment, do you rely solely upon the records provided to you?
No.
What else is involved?
As I mentioned previously, we do an interview with the individual. We will also do testing. We also do collateral interviews. Very helpful for us to have other people's perspectives about the individual.
Why is it important to have someone else's perspective?
Because we want to corroborate information. We want to corroborate things that they tell us. And historically, there may also be things, particularly with autism, that individual doesn't know that are critical for the diagnosis. So really, one of the things we have to determine is there, developmental problems or delays early in life. So 1, 2, 3 years old. Obviously, the person we're interviewing will be able to tell us that information. So those collateral sources, primary caregivers, those types of folks can provide that information to us.
Is it possible to do a comprehensive evaluation without speaking to collateral witnesses?
Not in my opinion, not in a case like this for autism.
You said that you meet with the individual. How many times did you meet with Tanner?
We met with him on 2 occasions.
Do you know for about how long you met with Tanner?
The total duration was about 9¼ hours. We met with him across 2 days. I think the first day much longer. I think the second day we met with him maybe 1.5 hours to 2 hours.
Well, Dr. Imhoff, you said that you reviewed all of these records, that you spoke with Tanner. that you spoke with collateral witnesses. What is the goal of all of that? I mean, why is it important to review everything like that?
We are really just trying to get as much information as we can to support diagnoses, whether it's an autism diagnosis or some other mental health diagnoses. And we just take all that information in, and that helps us support a diagnosis.
Can that information also help you to rule out a diagnosis?
Yes.
How important is it to be able to rule out a diagnosis?
Well, I mean, obviously, many presentations can appear the same. So we want to make sure that we have the information that's going to kind of help us understand which one it is. So we want to rule out diagnoses for that purpose.
I want to focus a little bit on the testing that you did in this case. And again, are the tests that you performed listed in the report that you provided?
Yes, ma'am.
The testing that you did, was that related specifically to diagnosing autism?
Yes.
Are there tests that are related to diagnosing autism that are considered to be the gold standard of autism testing?
Yes, ma'am.
And what are those?
Predominantly the ADOS, the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule, now in its second revision. There's another tool. Let me back up. The ADOS is a tool that's actually administered to the individual that we're assessing. There's another tool that we use called the ADIR, the Autism Diagnostic Interview Revised. This is a semi-structured interview that's done with a primary caregiver, because that's one of the tools that kind of helps us go back and look at early developmental criteria and symptoms and expressions of autism. So those two kind of combined together are considered to be the gold standard in our field.
And Dr. Imhoff, did the results of the ADIR and the ADOS reveal anything significant to you?
Yes.
And what is that?
Tanner would, on both tools, met the clinical cut score for diagnosis of autism.
What do you mean clinical cut score?
So we're collecting a lot of information, and then we go through and code that information in certain areas. So we're looking at things like social and emotional reciprocity, which is part of autism. We're looking at communication difficulties, which is another component of autism. And then we're looking at repetitive and restricted interests and behaviors, which is another kind of common presentation of autism. So we go through and we're looking for all these things during the interviews. We're looking for all these things during the interviews with the collateral witnesses. And then we go through and we code them. And you have to have so many, so many of the items to reach a clinical cut score, clinical diagnosis, so to speak.
In addition to doing the ADIR and the ADOS, are there any other tests that you perform that can confirm the results of those previous tests?
One of the things that we prefer to do is use a tool called the SRS-2, or the Social Responsiveness Scale. This is a tool that looks at social awareness, so being able to go into a room, pick up on nonverbal cues, kind of the buzz in the room, understand, read the room. Comprehension, so being able to take that information, process it, and then response. So once I have that information, how do I then respond to the people in the room? How do I communicate with them? There's also a scale on there for social motivation, as well as restricted and repetitive interests and behaviors. And it's a tool that's highly correlated with diagnoses of autism. So we use that in addition to kind of support the diagnosis.
I noted in your report that you have given something called the ABAS.
Yes.
What is that?
So the ABAS is the Adaptive Behavior Assessment System, now in its third revision. The ABAS is a tool that looks at functionality. So it's one thing to have a diagnosis, but everybody's different, and that's the really important thing to understand. So everybody with autism is not the same. They have impairments, or they have strengths in certain areas. They have weaknesses in certain areas. So the ABAS kind of helps us pull that out. So it's really a measure of functionality. It looks at things like social motivation, social engagement. It looks at just kind of practical skills, like being able to use functional academics, like balance a checkbook, use math. It looks at things like work and ability to work and hold down a job, those types of things. So we use that to kind of help us understand where the deficits may lie.
Dr. Imhoff, so the ADIR and the ADOS diagnose, are tools to diagnose autism. The SRS confirms the diagnosis, and then the ADAS talks about how that diagnosis affects the subject.
Yes,
Okay.
in a nutshell, that's correct.
Based upon the results of the testing and the observations and the records that you reviewed, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, did Tanner Horner meet the criteria for autism spectrum disorder as outlined by the DSM?
Yes.
Did you also evaluate Tanner for post-traumatic stress or any other symptoms related to traumatic events?
We do. Often, and just from our experience, from our training, we know that individuals on the spectrum often experience a lot of trauma in their lives. Just because, people on the spectrum present different. So often in school, obviously, kids don't like other kids who are different, so they tend to tease, pick on, and bully them, which is a type of trauma. But also in the records, there was, multiple indications of traumatic events and trauma throughout Tanner's life. So we felt that important to capture as well. So we use a tool called the TSI, the Trauma Symptom Inventory 2. It was designed to measure PTSD, but it also provides very helpful information about trauma and the impact of that trauma on the individual. And specifically for our individuals on the spectrum, there's scales in there related to insecure attachments, impaired self-reference, so not having a good idea of sense of self, who one is, and how that often is taken advantage of by others. So we tend to look at that as well.
What did that test reveal to you about Tanner Horner?
What that test revealed was a lot of significant trauma in his life. He reported symptoms of flashbacks, nightmares, those types of things related to traumatic events in his life. He reported high levels of anxiety on that tool as well. Not just anxiety, but also hypervigilance, which is always kind of being on guard and being very vigilant of your surroundings. But also depression was also another area that he elevated. Anger, frustration, which is common among individuals with autism. And also, in dealing with high levels of anxiety and the difficulties that Tanner dealt with, how he would deal with those. So there's different ways people deal with stress and trauma. One way is to kind of just, I'm not going to think about dissociation. There's, another form of dissociation, which is kind of checking out, just kind of zoning out and checking out and spacing out. Or tension-reducing behaviors, which can be directed towards the environment, or can be directed towards oneself. So when people experience high levels of anxiety or stress, they tend to act out to reduce or relieve that tension and stress. And we can see this in multiple ways throughout Tanner's life. A lot of suicide attempts, a lot of self-harm, and those types of things.
Dr. Imhoff, with regards to the TSI, are there any validity scales associated with that test?
Yes, there are.
What is the validity scale?
So there's one called the ATR, atypical response, and one called RL, which is response level. So what these scales do is they look at over-reporting or under-reporting. So someone who wants to over-report to look particularly mentally ill or having particularly high levels of PTSD or stress or anxiety. And then there's other individuals who just want to kind of pretend there's not problems, kind of minimize their problems, so under-reporting, as we call it. Tanner produced with and normal limits profiles on both of those. So he wasn't over or under-reporting. He was just being open, honest, and candid in his reporting.
So based upon the TSI and the validity scales, was there any indication of malingering?
No, not on that tool.
On any of the tools that you had given him, was there any indication of malingering?
The other tools really don't have validity scales built into them.
Based upon your interview and review the records and the evaluation of Tanner, did you arrive at any formal diagnoses other than the autism spectrum disorder that you mentioned earlier?
I also diagnosed Tanner with bipolar 1 disorder. Most recent episode, depressed. I think medications have been helpful in stabilizing his mood somewhat by his report. So that's indicated in the diagnosis as well. And I also diagnosed him with generalized anxiety disorder. It's really based on everything that we saw in the records, behaviors that we observed in him, and the results of the testing.
And lastly, Dr. Imhoff, based upon the records, the 9 hours that you spent with Tanner and the review of all of the evidence in the case and the interviews with the collateral witnesses, were you able to determine if Tanner met the criteria for antisocial personality disorder as set forth in the DSM?
I did not diagnose him with antisocial personality disorder, no.
Why not?
He didn't meet the criteria.
I'll pass the witness on.
Cross-examination.
Dr. Imhoff, let me ask you a couple of questions. You note on the first page of your report that he was provided with some documents that he signed before he was interviewed by your team. Is that okay if I call it your team? That'll be you and Dr. Spence? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. You use the word teamwork. So
It is a team approach, yes.
All right, I'm going to use that. You said he reviewed some documents and signed some things before you interviewed him. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And at any point, did he have any problem understanding what you were explaining to him about those particular documents and what he was signing?
No.
And so you felt comfortable with regard to, for example, his intelligence, his ability to understand things at that point to be able to go ahead and interview him?
Yes, he has an average IQ.
All right. But he didn't have any dramatic problems understanding the forms and warnings and all the stuff that you gave him?
No, we explained it to him in great detail.
All right. And during the interview, I think that you guys took notes during the interview, right? And I think we've been given a copy of your notes. I'm going to ask you about that in a second. Let's talk just a little bit here. I want to clarify this. It seems to me you've got about, 30, 40 hours into this case. Is that right?
I would say that's probably fair, maybe an underestimate.
Okay. So 50?
I haven't added it up, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Well, if we said 40, you would say that's an underrepresentation.
Possibly. I mean, there was obviously time spent preparing for testimony, travel here, time here. So.
Of course. All right. Now, some of the things I wanted to ask you about is that I got what appears, and I'm going to show this to you. I have 3 sets of notes here. Is that your understanding that there were 3 sets of notes that were provided?
I only have 1 set of notes. I don't know what Dr. Spence would have provided.
Okay. Do you mind if I show you what was provided so you can tell me which ones are yours and which ones are
sure.
Dr.
Mine are going to be the ones with interview notes written across it.
This is you? Where it says interview notes?
Yes, that's mine.
And so do you have any awareness of what Dr. Spence put in her notes, or do I need to ask her about that?
I didn't read her notes, no.
Okay. All right. We'll stick to yours that has the watermark on it. All right, certainly. So during this process, these tests that you give, and they have a lot of acronyms or abbreviations on them. I'm not going to get into that. But were any of these tests that were done that were things that were self-reported by Mr. Horner?
So the ADOS would be self-report. We're asking him questions. We're engaging him in a different number of activities.
Okay.
But a lot of that is also we're observing him and what he's doing and how he's interacting with us. The SRS would have been self-report by him, and the ADAS would have been self-report by him, as well as the TSI.
Okay. So those 4 tests, you're relying, at least in some part, on the accuracy and the truthfulness of what he's telling you. Is that right?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that his truthfulness is important in answering those questions for you to make a reliable diagnosis. Is that right? Right, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
yes.
We were talking over each other a little bit, I'm sorry.
It's helpful, but we also had, collateral information. We also had records which corroborated a lot of what he said, so.
Of course. But again, like anything else, it's a multi-part approach, right?
Yes, we're looking at the issue from several different angles or sources of information, if you will.
Right. And so when you're talking about that and you're taking notes, you said that you watched the video in this case, is that right? How many videos did you watch in this case?
There, I believe, were 2 interrogation videos with law enforcement, and the one which has been referred to as the abduction video.
Okay. And you felt that that was relevant to your assessment in this case?
Yes.
Okay. So just give me the highlights here. You watched all these videos. What do you think is displaying Mr. Horner's autism in these videos?
So one of the reasons we watched the interrogation videos is it had to do with this reference to zero and the possibility of multiple personality disorders. And I was interested in seeing his presentation at those times. There were some indications in the abduction video of levels of anxiety, increase in anxiety, difficulties with change. Individuals on the spectrum have a lot of difficulty with changes in routines and those kinds of things. There was what appeared to be, to me, stimming behavior, which stimming behavior, when people on the spectrum get anxious, they engage in some kind of repetitive motor activity. Most people, when I talk about autism, think about the hand flapping, which is kind of classic. But there's also other stimming behavior, like some of our individuals we work with will touch their fingers to their fingertips, or they'll wring their hands in certain ways, or they'll arch their back. So these are all kind of different stimming behaviors.
Right. And you said you observed some anxiety.
It appeared that he was very anxious in parts of the video that we watched.
You'd agree with me, if you just kidnapped a child, you'd probably be a little anxious, wouldn't you?
Well, that was actually prior to the abduction portion.
Okay. Did you talk to him about what he was doing in those videos? Did you have any discussion with him?
We did not talk to him about facts of the case.
Okay. But you watched the audio and you made some assessments from it, but you didn't talk to him about it.
Videos, no.
You didn't feel like that was important as part of what you were doing here?
Well,
talk to him about it?
Actually, we did talk to him a little bit about zero, the alternate identity. I did ask him some questions about that.
But ultimately, you concluded zero's not a multiple personality at all.
In my opinion, he would not qualify for multiple personalities.
Right. And so as part of this, you also said, I want to get this right here, you asked him about his substance abuse?
Yes, sir.
I think you have kind of a litany of questions that you ask him about his substance abuse. I think it's like hallucinogens, marijuana, cocaine, crack, things like that, right?
Yeah, different categories of substances, yes.
And do you remember what his responses were to you and what you put in your report on those particular questions?
Well, off the top of my head, he
I'm
reported...
going to interrupt you. Let's do this. Let me just take you right to that part of your
Okay.
report, and that way we don't have to do it off topic. Will you go to page 9 of your report, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And I'm just gonna pick it out here a little bit, just kind of yes, no, a little bit here. I just want to make sure I'm correct here.
Sure.
It says that he used powdered cocaine at the age of 30, and his consumption was once per month and 2 times per month. Is that accurate?
Yeah, he said it varied between once per month or twice per month.
He didn't tell you he was using any cocaine on the day of the offense?
We didn't ask him about the day of the offense.
I'm gonna ask you. He didn't tell you he was using any on the day of the offense?
He didn't offer that information.
And then the second part of that, it's got, I'm going to characterize that as psychedelics, LSD, acid, things like that. Is that the second part of that?
Psychedelic mushrooms, LSD, yes.
Okay,
Ecstasy
and
can
he
be
says that
classified there.
sporadically.
Yes.
And then it says denied the use of crack and so on and so forth. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, on these tests, Doctor, we talked a little bit about, you said 4 of the tests that you gave at least required some portion of answers and reporting by Mr. Horner himself.
Yes, 4 of them would have, yes.
And I don't think you only gave, 5 or 6 tests total?
Given to Mr. Horner?
Yeah.
So he would have received the ADOS, the SRS, the ABAS, and the TSA.
So all 4 of the tests that you gave him required some information for you to complete the test directly from Mr. Horner.
Yes. I don't know that I classify it that way. Some were just self-report forms where he fills them out himself.
Okay, so
It wasn't interactive.
let me just make this a general thing. You have to get some things from him.
Yes.
Okay. And in this case, sir, you're aware that, from reading all this stuff, that Mr. Horner has had a pretty serious propensity for telling falsehoods and making up different stories. You're aware of that, right?
Objection, Your Honor, to the characterization.
Sustain. Rephrase your question.
Are you aware that Mr. Horner has told untruth with regard to the facts of this case?
I'm aware that Mr. Chandler has told different stories to different people.
And were you aware of that coming in before you did these tests where he required him to have self-reporting?
Think about that for a moment. I would believe so. I don't recall specifically.
Okay.
Honestly, I'm sorry.
Well, you reviewed an extensive amount of records according to your affidavit, is that right?
Yes.
And you reviewed the other expert reports in this case, did you not?
Yes, those would have come after we saw him. Yes.
Right. And so you're aware that at least as to his initial story in this case as to what he did, that's untrue.
I am aware that there have been multiple stories in reference to what actually transpired by him.
So knowing that, going into that, how can you place any faith on what he's telling you is accurate and true if you know coming in that he's not been truthful in the past?
Well, as I mentioned previously, one of the tools that we use has validity scales in it, so it looks for over-reporting, under-reporting, that type of thing. We also had corroborating information. That's why we did collateral interviews with other individuals. We had school records. We had records from mental health treatment facilities. So through that, we were able to identify consistent information.
But things like things that he reported to you about his feelings, things that he reported to you about how he relates to other people, things of that nature, that would come solely from Mr. Horner, correct?
From his perspective, yes, but also, as part of the ADIR, we are asking primary caregivers, how did he relate to other children his age? Did he play with them? Did he seem to get along with them? Did he seem to understand rules of the games, follow the rules of the games? All those types of things that engage social interaction. We also, there's questions in there about, is he able to describe his feelings to you? Did he seem to have one expression all the time for one, just one expression all the time, or would his expression vary depending on the situation? So there's a lot of corroborating information.
I guess what I'm getting at, Doctor, you're telling us you believe what he was saying.
I believe that the tests were valid, yes, because actually 2 of the tests, the SRS and the ABAS, were also completed by his paternal grandmother with very similar scores.
And I'm going to ask you this the last thing. So your notes in here have the watermark on it,
Yes, sir.
and I just want to clarify this with you. Dr. Spence, notes are the ones that look like that? They just have the print on them and no watermark?
Yes, my notes would have the watermark. You'll have to confirm with Dr. Spence. Those are her
Well,
notes.
let me ask you this. There were only two people involved in providing notes in this
I would
case?
assume they're Dr. Spence.
I would.
I can't really see them, I'm sorry.
That's okay. If we got
Far away.
two, perfectly okay. If we got two and yours had the watermark on them,
Mine
you would
would be-
agree with me?
I'm sorry, mine would be the one with the watermark, yes.
And Dr. Smith as well?
I would assume not.
Pass the witness, John.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Imhoff, you reviewed a lot of records in this case.
Yes.
Did the school records that were provided to you, prepared by providers at the school, corroborate your findings on these tests?
Yes. I mean, there were diagnoses of autism in those records. There were descriptions of behavior consistent with autism in those records, absolutely.
So the records that you reviewed dating back 20, 25 years, were there any inconsistencies with that diagnosis?
I'm not
All
sure
right,
I understand.
let me rephrase that. You looked at records that go back 20, 25 years. Was the
Yes.
diagnosis consistent?
Yes.
The prosecutor asked you about whether or not you felt Tanner understood the documents that he was signing. Were you testing for intellectual disability?
No, we didn't do any testing for intellectual disability.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. State,
Nothing further on.
may Dr. Imhoff be excused.
No objections?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
He can stay. If you'd like to sit in, you're welcome to stay.
Okay, thank you.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Uh-huh.